Shalom, bruchim habayim. We're very happy to see this big crowd here. My name is Galia Pressbar-Nathan. I'm the director of the Davis Institute for International Relations and member of the International Relations Department. I'm very happy that we have organized this event with the Confucius Center and the Asian Studies Department and the Freiberg Center for East Asian Studies. Forgot the name in English, okay. And I'm very, very happy to open this event to celebrate the 30 years plus 2 months of official diplomatic relations between China and Israel. And what we wanted to do today is to offer a brief, a few perspectives, thinking about a little bit about the past, but probably more about the future of the relationship between Israel and China from different dimensions, from the official Israeli dimension, the Chinese dimension, if Zoom works, from a more sort of business entrepreneurial direction, and of course a little bit of academia because we are still at the Hebrew University. So I'm very happy to host the event. And before we move to the actual discussion, I'm very happy to have with us here, well, actually not everyone is here. Where's Guy and, okay, they're too modest there, okay. I'm very happy to have with us here Ambassador Tsairun, who's the ambassador of the People's Republic of China, to say a few words for us. So, Ambassador, please, if you want to sit there or stand, whatever works for you.
Dear friends, good afternoon. It's my great pleasure to be here. And in fact, I'm deeply moved. Despite the pandemic, so many friends here. Vice President Omron Shagria, Professor Yuri Pines, Director Shagria, this morning, President Herzog told me, his advisor told me that Shagria means ambassador. So here, there are 3 ambassadors here. In fact, more than 3. And meet Ambassador Ben Yakov also here. Professor Han Xi, ladies and gentlemen, friends, it gives me great pleasure to attend the panel on the 30th anniversary of China-Israel diplomatic relations, co-hosted by the Hebrew University of Jerusalem and Peking University. As China and Israel are celebrating the 30th anniversary this year, it is of special significance that visionary people from both countries gather here to review the extraordinary history of China-Israel relations and look ahead to the bright future of bilateral cooperation. I'd like to express my warm congratulations on this panel and heartfelt appreciation to the Hebrew University of Jerusalem and Peking University, especially to Professor Yuri and Professor Han Xi for hosting this event. Taking this opportunity, I'd also like to extend my sincere greetings and thanks to all of you who have always been following and supporting the development of China-Israel relations. The 30th anniversary is an important milestone in the history of China-Israel relations. In November 2021, President Xi Jinping had a phone conversation with President Isaac Herzog. Both leaders agreed to take the 30th anniversary as an opportunity to deepen the China-Israel relationship. On the day of the two countries of the 30th anniversary, which was January 24th this year, leaders of the two countries exchanged a congratulatory message, and the fifth meeting of the China-Israel Joint Committee on Innovation Cooperation was successfully held. The two sides also held various celebration events in a joyful atmosphere. Chinese and Israel people from all walks of life talked about our traditional friendship, commended the mutually beneficial cooperation, and envisioned the future development of bilateral ties. Over the past 30 years, with joint efforts made by leaders and people of both countries, China-Israel relations have kept sound and steady development and achieved fruitful cooperation outcomes. The past 30 years have witnessed our increasing political mutual trust. Leaders of the two countries have maintained close interaction, and friendly exchanges have been increasingly frequent at all levels. We established the China-Israel Intergovernment Mechanism of Economic and Technological Cooperation, and the China-Israel Joint Committee on Innovation Cooperation in 2017. We launched the China-Israel Innovation Comprehensive Partnership, elevating bilateral relations to a new height. The past 30 years have witnessed vigorous development of mutual beneficial cooperation. Our bilateral trade volume rose from 50 million US dollars in 1992 to 22.8 billion US dollars in 2021, which has increased more than 450 times in just 30 years. China is Israel's largest trading partner in Asia and the second largest in the world. The two sides have cooperated in such landmark projects as the new port of Haifa, the Red Line of the Tel Aviv light rail, the China-Israel Changzhou Innovation Park, and the China-Israel Shanghai Innovation Park, making innovation cooperation a highlight and a driving force for bilateral relations. The past 30 years have witnessed flourishing people-to-people exchanges. The two countries opened direct flights between the Israel city of Tel Aviv and the Chinese cities of Beijing, Shanghai, Shenzhen, Chengdu, and Hong Kong. In 2019, 170,000 visits were made by Chinese tourists to Israel, and around 100,000 by Israelis to China. There are now 26 pairs of sister cities between China and Israel. Since the COVID-19 pandemic began, China and Israel have been helping each other, join hands to tackle challenges, showing vividly a friend in need is a friend indeed. Our friendship is further deepened with Israel athletes' active participation in the Beijing Winter Olympics. There are three reasons why China-Israel relations have withstood the test of the changing international landscape and kept sound and steady development. First, we share traditional friendship. The Chinese and the Jewish people have been respecting and supporting each other, laying the historical and emotional foundation for China-Israel relations. Second, we share mutual respect. Different national conditions haven't become obstacles to our friendly exchanges. The two sides abide by basic norms governing international relations, such as mutual respect for sovereignty and non-interference in internal affairs. These efforts helped strengthen the political foundation of bilateral relations. Third, we share win-win cooperation. China and Israel have similar visions, complementary development strengths, great potential, and bright prospects of cooperation. The essence of China-Israel cooperation is win-win results. As the Chinese sage Confucius said, a man should be steadfast at the age of 30. The Talmud also regards 30 as the most energetic age in life. A year has passed since I assumed my post. I have been impressed by the Israeli people's friendliness and great passion for China-Israel ties, and the bright prospects of bilateral relations. Taking the 30th anniversary as a new starting point, I will, also with my colleagues of at the Chinese embassy and friends on both sides, implement the important consensus reached by our leaders and write a new chapter of mutually beneficial cooperation between China and Israel. In this event, I hope all guests and friends from both sides could have in-depth discussions, build consensus, and contribute to China-Israel relations going forward. I wish this forum a complete success. I hope I didn't see so much. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Tsai, for these warm words. I would like to invite to the stage Professor Oron Shagrir, who's Vice President at Hebrew University of Jerusalem.
Hello, good afternoon. It gives me a great pleasure to take part in this event that marks the 30 years of diplomatic relations between China and Israel. Since the establishment of the relations, we saw a rapid increase in the economic and also academic relations between the two countries. As Ambassador Tsai mentioned, it's not very surprising because the two people, the Chinese and the Israelis, have a lot in common. One common feature, I'll add another one, is that both people care a lot about the education of their daughters, of their sons, and even of their grandchildren, and invest a lot of energy and sources in educating the young generation. At the academic level, we also see in recent years extensive relations between the academic institutions in Israel and in China. It was not so at the beginning. I remember that 25 years ago, my young brother Chagai, who sits here, he was my younger, I should say, but 25 years ago he was also a young deputy consul of Israel in the city of Shanghai. And he told me, well, you know, the academia in China is really going under revolution, and he predicted that within very few decades, the Chinese university will be ranked among the top universities in the world. Well, then it took us time to understand this message, I must admit, but a few years ago we started to really increase and collaborate with China very extensively. I want to mention just a few partnerships we have with academic institutions in China. As Ambassador Tsai mentioned, we have a joint Confucius Institute here at Mount Scopus, which is joint with Beidai University, with PKU. We have joint doctoral programs in biomedical sciences and another one in agriculture with Shanghai Jiao Tong University. We also have a joint research fund that support joint research projects between researchers in the university. We have also a joint research fund with the Beijing Center for Nanosciences. And in China, this center includes researchers from Tsinghua, from PKU, and from the Chinese Academy of Sciences. These are just few, and we have many exchange programs with this university, with Zhejiang, Sun Yat-sen, and the other universities. Still, I have to say, I see a lot of potential yet there, and I think that there is much to do, and we intend and we are looking forward to doing this. So I want at the end to thank deeply to Ambassador Tsai for attending this event, and also to all of you, colleagues, professors and students, and I'm sure that you will enjoy the event. Thank you.
Okay. I'm too short for this. Yeah. Last but not least, before we move on to our main program, I would like to invite Guy Hanin and Yuval Kiefer, who are the students who are the active spirits behind this event and worked really hard pushing us faculty and doing all the, the hard work that no one sees. So, Guy and Yuval, please.
Hello everyone, good evening and welcome. My name is Guy. I am a first-year student of International Relations Studies and China Studies.
My name is Yuval. I'm second-year student of International Relations and Asian Studies.
In January this year, we commemorated 30 years to the establishment of diplomatic relations between the People's Republic of China and the State of Israel. Establishing diplomatic relations is a major event in the two countries' history. So I found it important to fight a convention regarding this matter.
A few months ago, Guy approached me and asked for my help in organizing the event, to which I happily agreed. We sat together and discussed the different ideas as to how it will be conducted. When we finalized the details, we reached our faculty in both departments for help.
And now to the thanks. We would like to thank the Ambassador of the People's Republic of China in Israel, His Excellency Ambassador Tsai. Thank you for honoring us with your presence. Tsai Daishi, Fei Chan, Ganxie.
Thank you.
And please excuse us for now saying a few things in Hebrew. לדוברים שהסכימו לתרום מזמנם ומהידע שלהם לקחת חלק באירוע. פרופסור וואנג מאוניברסיטת בייג'ין, מר חגי שגריר, סגן ראש אגף אסיה והפסיפיק במשרד החוץ, מר אילן מימון, יזם איש עסקים ישראלי מהשוק הסיני, דוקטור תמר גוספלד עוזרי, מרצה וחוקרת בחוג ללימודי אסיה פה באוניברסיטה.
ותודה נוספת למכונים קונפוציוס, פריברג ודייוויס ולעומדים בראשם פרופסור יורי פינס, פרופסור אורנה נפתלי ופרופסור גליה פרס בר נתן, על ההירתמות והנכונות לסייע בגיבוש ובמימון האירוע, ולכלל הסגל מהחוגים ליחסים בינלאומיים ולימודי אסיה על התמיכה. וכמובן, תודה לכולכם שבאתם והקדשתם מזמנכם, ושיהיה לנו ערב מעניין ומעשיר. תודה.
Okay, thank you very much. So now we will move on without further ado to our four speakers. Maybe what I will do is I will introduce all of you at once, and then we can just, move from one to the other, because the introductions are always, the slow part of the story. Okay, so I'm very happy to have with us four speakers, and I think Guy actually preempted me with basically sort of summarizing this. Our first speaker will be Mr. Chagai Shagrir, the second Shagrir of the four Shagririm here. Chagai is the deputy head of Asian Pacific Department in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, responsible for Israel-China relations. He also served in Shanghai, as we just heard, and was project director for setting the two Israeli consulates in China, in Guangzhou and in Chengdu. And I should also note that he has an MA in Chinese studies from the Hebrew University, so solid foundation there. So Chagai would talk to us about the Israeli, I guess, more official perspective regarding the relations. Next we will move on, I hope we're fine with this, to Professor Wang Suolao, who is joining us on Zoom, right? Who am I should be looking at? Okay, yes. Yeah. I'm very suspicious of technology, so innovation and everything, person to person still works the best. Professor Wang is an associate professor in the School of International Studies at Peking University of China. He's been a faculty member there since 1989. He is currently the director of the Center for Middle Eastern Studies in the School of International Studies at Peking University. He's also an executive member of China's Association for Middle Eastern Studies and a member of China's Association for Afro-Asian Studies. And he also spent 2 years at the Hebrew University in 2001 and 2. And earlier, he also spent a few years in Cairo University. So I think there's really no better person for us to sort of have here to offer an insightful and accurate perspective from the Chinese side of the story. Third, we are happy to have here Mr. Ilan Maimon from the business entrepreneurial perspective. Ilan is the general manager and legal representative for the Israel Jiangsu Center established in Tel Aviv by Jiangsu province. He had lived in China from 2002 to 2018, and during these years he founded in Shanghai and Changzhou a diverse network of self-owned companies in various fields. And one of the highlights of his business activity in China was the contribution for the transformation of Changzhou city as a major center for Israeli business enterprise and activities. Over 130 Israeli business entities that have registered their own companies there. And this has become one of the business pivots for the bilateral Israeli-Chinese business interface. Wow, okay. Last but not least, I'm very happy to have with us here Dr. Tami Roswald-Ozeri to talk about the academic perspective and the future of the relations. Tami is an assistant professor at the Asian Studies Department at Hebrew University here in Jerusalem. She's a legal sinologist, and her research examines the relationship between law, politics, and market development in contemporary China, with a focus on the development of corporations and capital markets. Tami is also not only an academic, she actually also, prior to academia, worked in a legal practice and spearheaded the China department of a leading Israeli law firm while residing in China and in Israel. So basically, I could say that all of our three Israeli speakers have spent a lot of time on the ground actually experiencing China, not just studying China from a distance. And our Chinese speaker has actually also spent real time in the region, which I think is extremely useful. So without further ado, what we'll do is we'll give about 10 minutes to each one of you. So maybe we'll have some time at the end for a few questions from the audience. I apologize in advance if we won't have a lot of time and I won't be able to actually, we won't be able to answer everyone. So thank you very much, and we'll start with Mr. Chadai Shagrir, and you can speak from there with a microphone or come here, whatever is better for you.
So I will speak from here, if it's okay. Forgive me for the nepotism, for the family nepotism that we have in this event, my brother and myself, but it happens from time to time. And I would like to acknowledge Ambassador Tsai, which we work very closely together with him and with his dear colleagues from the embassy. And a special acknowledgement for Ambassador Ben Yaakov, which is a great mentor for me and for so many Israeli diplomats who have served in China. It's so good to see you here. And dear guests, I would like to, I was here exactly, I think, 10 years ago. I think it was in Bet Meyersdorf. You celebrated 20th anniversary of the relationship. And by the way, this year is a year of anniversaries for several countries in Asia. For Israel, we also have to remind ourselves. We celebrate the 70th anniversary with Japan, 60th anniversary with Korea, and 30th anniversary with China and India. And that was done within 5 days in January in 1992. And we were unable to do it because there was a major geostrategic change at that time. That was the collapse of the Soviet Union, plus a beginning of a political process, the Madrid process here in our region, And that really enabled Israel to set up the official ties with the two Asian giants at that time. So 10 years ago I was here, and I was talking about what, I expect or Israel expect for the following 10 years. And the achievements are really amazing. And Ambassador Tsai, touched upon some of them. First of all, it's the high-level contact between the two countries. Within these 10 years, last 10 years, and we have to admit it's not exactly 10 years because we have to take down Corona and we have to take down also a year of political turmoil here in Israel. We had 4 election campaigns just prior to the Corona, so it was really very difficult to do something, so we are talking about 7 years. So if we take 7 years, the achievements are really amazing. We had 2 prime ministers' visits to China, 1 presidential visit. There was an exchange of the Speaker of the Knesset and the Speaker of the NPC, which is visited here. And the Vice President of China, Wang Qishan, which came to Israel to hold together with our Prime Minister the 4th meeting of the JCAC. And of course, what the ambassador have mentioned, the 5th meeting of the Joint Committee of Innovation, which was on a virtual basis, and we've done it exactly on the 24th of January this year, again with the Vice President Wang Qishan and Yair Lapid, the alternate Prime Minister and Foreign Minister. And this is actually, I think, the biggest achievement is this platform, the JCAC, Joint Committee for Cooperation of Innovation. It involves 15 ministries and government agencies from each side, and we promote cooperation between the two governments on the areas that we agreed that we want to promote. And it works fine, and we're really looking for next year. This platform meets on an annual basis, so we are looking very much also for next year. I have to say also that in this decade we also set up 2 more consulate generals in China. We used to have the Beijing Embassy, Shanghai Consulate, and we set up 2 more consulates, which I think reflect the importance that Israel sees in China. So the consulate in southern China, in Guangzhou, and no one knew what is Guangzhou until we had the famous soccer player, Israeli soccer player playing for, what's his name? I forgot. Eran, wow, sorry, forgive me, Eran Zehavi. So suddenly everyone in Israel knew what is Guangzhou. Before that, no one. And the consulate general in Western China, in Chengdu. So and then if we go for the economic level of the relationship, Ambassador Tsai mentioned many of them. China is an important economic partner to Israel. We saw more investments coming from China to Israel. It actually, how am I with the time?
Very good, very good.
Okay, so I will touch the achievements in my 10 minutes, and later on I will, touch upon the challenges, because there are challenges, but I will leave it for a later part. So the economic dimension of the relationship is very important. We are also negotiating now a free trade agreement. We hope this year to complete, and when we finalize, it will contribute to more Israeli export, and also it will lower the prices of Chinese goods here in Israel. It will contribute to more competition. There are also Chinese companies that are doing infrastructure projects here in Israel. Ambassador mentioned some of them, and all in all, they are doing a good job, and it helps, to diversify the number of companies that compete here in tenders in Israel. It helps also to lower the price of the project. So all in all, it's a positive development. I don't know if you know, but there are currently about 10,000 Chinese construction workers in Israel, which are doing residential and commercial building here in Israel. Most of them through bilateral agreement between the two countries, and some of them through Chinese civilian construction company. And as you know, now the housing is a major issue of Israel economy, and younger people, especially like you, who would like to have an affordable housing. So the Chinese have a great contribution for this effort. Of course, we have the academia, which Oron elaborated. I think today most of the Israeli leading academic institute have a very good contact with their Chinese one, and of course many other areas. I would like to mention one thing that again we see it as a big achievement, and that was initiated by the Foreign Ministry. It was a special program to bring young Chinese leadership to Israel. We invested in it for about 4 or 5 years. We brought here more than 600 Chinese young leaders from various circles, from the political, academic, provincial, entrepreneurs, private sector, think tanks, bloggers, and media people. And it was really amazing, because if you want to really understand what Israel is about, of course you have to be here and to come here. So, and I'm about with the time, 2 minutes. Okay, so I will just say very shortly, we're looking very forward, to continue this very positive momentum between the two countries. We do have challenges. I will just mention them, and if you want later on, we will develop. I think the COVID, is the biggest challenge because we are living on LCD. Here, the guest is here from Peking University. We're having a lot of Zooms, and a lot of emails and telephone calls. But it really hurt, the transaction or the movement of people from one country to the other. No more direct flights, and this is also one of the biggest achievements. We had, before the corona, about 25 weekly direct flights between the two countries. So now everything almost came to a halt, and we really feel, it has impact on the relationship. The second challenge, which we must touch upon, of course, is China-US relation, which definitely have an impact not only on Israel, but on many countries around the world. And the third challenge, which I see it, which is going to be a challenge for the following years, I think it's Iran. Because when we're going to have the agreement, and probably we're going to have the agreement, we're going to have, especially Iran probably will rush after the agreement, for the bomb. This is what we believe. And especially the ICRG, the Islamic Revolutionary Guards, suddenly they will start to get money after the agreement, because the country will rush to do business with Iran. So it's going to be an organization with a lot of money and a lot of intentions, to promote this stability throughout the Middle East and to promote terrorism around the Middle East. And Israel is going probably to be the main target of Iran. And then the question, what China will do, when we're going to be in this position. So, it might create, one more friction between us. So this is for now, and later on.
Thank you very much. Very punctual. Okay, so I need to understand where to look. No? Where's the camera? Here? Okay, Professor Wang. We're very happy to have you here. I hope I'm looking at the right dot on the LCD screens. Yes. So the floor is yours. I hope I introduced you properly. I'm happy if you correct me. And you have approximately 10 minutes, 10, 12 minutes. Thank you.
It is my great honor to be invited to attend this great event. Distinguished guests and distinguished my colleague in Hebrew University. Actually, this is really a great event. I still remembered in the year 1992, I was in Cairo, and through TV, I witnessed the scenario of conclusion of Oslo Accord in Cairo. I understand at that time, it's a shocking news for many Egyptians. And in 10 years anniversary of bilateral relations between China and Israel, I was in Israel from 2001 and 2002. I was in Hebrew University as a visiting scholar. And at the 20th anniversary of the bilateral relations, I was in Beijing and I held a conference to commemorate and to celebrate the 20th anniversary. And I invited the Israeli ambassador in Beijing, he's a general, unfortunately I forgot his name, and to give a very good talk to our conference. And now we are in the 30th anniversary of the bilateral relations. So I think a lot about this. What's the difference 30 years ago and 30 years past? Maybe 30 years ago, just the beginning of end of the Cold War. So the last 30 years, the whole world witnessed the prosperity of cooperation. In my understanding, the end of Cold War means cooperation more than confrontation between different allies and between different countries. Now, unfortunately, we witness the beginning of a new Cold War. And look at the current situation, the Ukraine and Russian war, and maybe in the future, the potential conflict in the East Asia. For course, this is another issue. But for the Israeli and China relationship, if the two countries witness and continue the current good relationship in the next 10 years or next 30 years, I think, from my understanding, I'm not the diplomat, just our ambassador do. I'm a scholar. In my understanding, I think three things are more important. The first one is mutual understanding. Mutual understanding, that means the two countries, Israelis and Chinese, we should correctly understand the ancient history of both countries. That China, we have 5,000 years history. And also Israel had more than 5,000 the breeding history, the Jewish people and the Jewish culture and the civilization. And that means China, we have characteristics of our own culture, and the same thing for the Jewish people, because always we two people for some time was wrong understanding by some people in the region and in the international arena. And also another unfortunate thing is many people understand our two countries' culture and the current situation, not through our two language, Hebrew language and Chinese language, but through English or Arabic, especially through American Western perspectives or through Arab and Islamic perspectives. Of course, if you read newspaper or other new media, you can easily find this. This is the first thing. And the second thing, I think, mutual respect is also another very important thing. How to understand mutual respect, I think, for our both country, I think we should respect on the sovereignty and territorial integrity. For China, I think we should respect Israel's real unique relationship with the United States, because we all know this is very important for Israel and important for the United States. We, as Chinese, I totally understand this. This is a very, very vital for Israeli interest. And also for Israel should also understand China's normal relationship with Iran, because I also heard from our Israeli friend that the China's relationship with Iran maybe, stirs some controversial point among Israelis. Just my colleague from Israel just said that several minutes ago. And another thing I think is very important is non-interference on internal affairs. So recent years, there are some criticism from Israeli side on Xinjiang issues, and also Taiwan issues and Tibet issues and other so-called human rights issues. And also in Chinese side, also there are some controversial on Israelis fighting against the terrorists and against some local fighters. So I think one important thing we should mutually respect. And also third thing I think is very important is mutual cooperation. Although we have different perspectives, but cooperation is most important for our two countries to keep and promote our relationship. One scenario, I think, is educational cooperation. For myself, I learned a lot in Israel, in Hebrew University, 20 years ago when I was here. And I learned something in Israel. I understand the Jewish people's uniqueness, and also its really special relationship with the neighboring Arab countries. And I also witnessed many Chinese students, they promote their technological learning in Israel, in Hebrew University, in Tel Aviv University, in Haifa University. Although many of them later, they moved to the United States, pursue their post-PhD work job. And also, with two countries, we can promote technological cooperation. I know many Chinese firms, they have their branch in Israel. And also Israeli firms also have their branch in China. Even with two countries, we can make cooperation on military side. Although we all know we witnessed a setback on Falcon early warning system more than 20 years ago because of United States interference. Anyway, for the future, I think with two countries, we have a lot of things to do to keep the relationship going forward. From my understanding, Israel is a very, very special country, not only in the world, but also not only in the Middle East, but also in the world. For China, no godless to say that China is a quickly rising country. I think there are enormous room for the two countries to keep a good relationship, although there are some difficulties and foreign interferences. But I think we two sides, we have enough wisdom to overcome the difficulties and setbacks. And forgiveness, my talking focus on international relations because I'm from the School of International Studies. This is my specialty. I didn't want to waste too much time of our distinguished guests. If I said something uneasy for understanding, please forgive me. Thank you all. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Wang. We move now to business, right? From below, Mr. Ilan Maimon, please.
Good evening to everyone. Ambassador Tsai, the brother Shagrir, Professor Shagrir. Well, when I came to this event, I considered what I would like to speak about.
Ilan, let's take off.
Okay. I did consider what I'm going to speak about, and what in fact, from my experience, I should and would like to share with you. Obviously, unfolding 20 years living in China, the time would not be enough to tell this story. However, I would like to approach to all the young people here, because I believe the rest are quite familiar with the numbers and with the process, with what actually happened in the relations between Israel and China in the past 30 years. Personally, for me, I'm celebrating 20 years because I never knew anything about China before I landed in China in February 2002. So that is Chabudo, 20 years. And in these 20 years, in fact, I learned so many things about China and about the opportunity that lives within China. We have, in fact, quite similar people. Our nation, the Jewish nation and the Chinese nation, it's almost unbelievable how close we are in so many values. Obviously, these are the only two countries that had the nation miracle. If you consider China 1949 and Israel 1948, and you consider what these two nations did within these years, so it cannot be other than a miracle, in fact, to consider how they started this situation and what is now the countries, or what are now the people of those countries experiencing. For me, it was amazing, in fact, as a person, to come to China and to be free to do what I know how to do, is to establish businesses. In fact, I established few businesses in China. The first one was in 2002. I sold few of them. So this is almost like the Israeli young people narrative, to go to work in a startup, set up your own company and sell it, or continue work on it, develop it. So this was my experience in China. I found out that not only it was not easy, I'm looking for the words, how to describe this process, in fact, of setting your own company in China, working with employees, with Chinese employees, Chinese managers. During the years, I employed over hundreds of families or employees, Chinese employees in different places, different companies. And I always found this experience amazing. Therefore, at least for all of you that are listening, and obviously you are here because you are interested in China, consider China as your best place to continue and develop your future. That was my personal experience. Of course, as Mr. Shagrir said, there are also challenges. Nothing is easy, and on the way of doing that, you have to become close to the culture. Culture is actually the biggest gap between Israelis and Chinese. However, the base behind these culture differences is quite the same. We all care about our family, and family is the core place where each one of us coming out from. with that, I think the parallelism is there. When I'm looking on the next 30 years, what I do hope, or I do wish, because it seems that business-wise, the countries are doing quite well. As Ambassador Tsai mentioned, Israel and China are trading in high volumes, which are growing from year to year. The trend looks promising for the next 30 years. I think people are doing business with each other quite well. And if I'm considering the next 30 years, what to expect or what to hope for in our relations is, of course, the political environment to become more smooth and more harmonious to cooperate between the countries. I really hope that there will be more openness with our leaders and both countries' leaders, in fact, to get closer to each other and to get the differences that the countries have, because this USA and China trade war, I would say, I hope that Israel will be able to look above it, to create a very stable platform or very stable ground for cooperation between the countries. I think that will for sure be good for both countries, even if mentioning the Iranian challenge, even looking at the present where we have this war in Ukraine and these type of things, and shows that USA is a little bit getting weaker to support its allies. I think China is not a bad direction or not a too far away hope that maybe China will create this peace between the countries, or will put its influence in Iran to create this relation, but this is not what I wanted to speak about. I wrote here few fields where I feel that the countries can cooperate deeper. The ties between China and Israel started on agriculture on the 90s with the Eisenberg activities in China. However, agriculture is still a very warm topic that Israel can place or cooperate with China in seeds, in areas of genetically modified crops. I forgot this word. Of course, water tech. That is also a field which Israel is quite strong about. There are a lot of Israeli companies and startups that can cooperate in China. Water is another hot topic also in China. Automotive, obviously, in our park in Changzhou, there are few Israeli companies which are within the automotive area. Medical devices is another field which is quite strong here in Israel. A lot of brain, a lot of ideas, and the need for medical care in China is growing or widening. And of course, renewable energy. That is the last, where I believe the countries can cooperate deeper and better. I think I finished here. I am open to hear questions, and thank you. Okay.
Thank you, and we move on to, now I'll do Tommy, okay?
Okay, if you wish.
Okay, I'm going to use the podium because I'm last and you're all tired and I need to find ways to entertain you. So I'm going to break the routine a little bit. Okay. Ambassador Tsai, distinguished guests, colleagues, students, and friends. Thank you for inviting me to present my perspective on Israel-China relationship, challenges, and opportunities. I'm a contemporary China scholar and do not study China's relations with Israel per se. Rather, my studies focus on understanding China on its own terms, specifically its legal system and political economy. Thus, instead of illuminating aspects of foreign relations between the two countries, which our esteemed opening speakers and my fellow panelists already covered extensively, my talking points will stem from my personal experience as a China scholar who gained her professional career and education while moving across 3 countries, Israel, China, and the US. As a young student, when I first made the call to combine my legal education with a degree in Chinese studies here at the Hebrew University of Jerusalem, I did it without any solid reason, but rather based on a general curiosity about what was to me then an unknown culture. This was just following China's accession to the WTO. At the time, items about China in the Israeli media were a rare sight. Don't get me wrong. There was a pretty good coverage of China's accession, but not about China per se. I remember the framework rather vividly. The eyes of the world turned to see what opportunities the Chinese market will offer. Business communities and media worldwide were pumping hopes about how China's WTO accession will open horizons of academic opportunities that will benefit their consumers and markets. Today, many criticize China for seizing the same opportunities to benefit their own. For decades, policymakers and international organizations focused on how China's accession will ultimately bring changes in its governance system, to draw China near some aspired, arguably optimal economic and governance model. Today, the same policymakers and international organizations understand that global influence is not a one-way street, and they're struggling to push back against the implications. Academics were not particularly different. Following China's WTO accession, a cottage industry of academic writing developed around China's growing integration with the world economy. Scholars offered a variety of creative institutional fixes borrowed from comparative system to quote-unquote aid China to get on the right path. Convergence was advocated as both inevitable and desirable endpoint. Today, few still hold this inevitability proposition. Yet those studying contemporary China on its own terms, that is, not only as a model comparable to others, are still few and far between. In my assessment, this is our greatest challenge, the challenge of overcoming ignorance about China. You see, our understanding of China did not change much since I first enrolled to Chinese studies in 2002. We share a timeline. Well, China and the world had changed dramatically. Yes, we now hear a lot about China's economic achievements through local and international media. We know that China became the 2nd largest economy in the world and soon the 1st largest. Many of us have heard that it is the world's growing consumers market, the world's first exporter, with the largest number of top busiest ports. We are well aware of China's amazing airports, bridges, dams, and the growth of its unstoppable high-speed rail network, and the spread of its magnitude of infrastructure projects along the ambitious Belt and Road. We're even somewhat aware that China is the country with the biggest number of global Fortune 500 firms, the 2nd largest capital market in the world with the highest growing numbers of IPOs year on year. We know all of these things, or most of them. We have a general understanding of China's economic magnitude. But most of us are not aware that China is now the country with the highest number of trademark applications and with the highest number of granted patents in the world. We know nothing of how it utilizes its $400 billion annual R&D spending, which, by the way, is targeted to increase 15% annually. Our policymakers are only now starting to fathom the scope of China's technological prowess. We have less than a vague sense of its megatech projects, from the Ping Tang telescope, the world's largest radio telescope, through its lead in medical implants technologies, robotics, AI, to its supercomputing achievements, and it being at the head of the curve in CBDC implementation. And thus, outside a small community of niche China experts, many in Israel believe that China is a rising global power. Few comprehend that it had already risen. How is that possible? This is because our people, our politicians, our business communities, our decision makers do not know enough about China. I'm not talking about knowledge about China's economic growth. I've already noted that our society has relative knowledge about that aspect. Rather, I'm referring to knowledge about what brought China to where it is today. Knowledge about its culture, its language, its history, its ideology and philosophy, its aspirations. Knowledge about its governance structure, internal politics, its priorities and domestic tensions, diversity and political economic challenges that China itself faces. Without deep understanding of all that, we cannot expect to appreciate China's place in the world and its actions today. Not least can we possibly assess its place in the future. At an institutional level, this impacts our ability to make decisions that are both informed and independent of external political pressures, in business, in science, and in foreign policy. At an individual level, ignorance produces suspicion, prejudice, and a general sense of an often unjustified alarm. Perhaps we take comfort by the fact that we're not alone in our ignorance. The lack of contemporary China expertise is a problem shared by many countries, particularly in the western parts of the developed world. China, in turn, is surely not out of blame, as it does not make the flow of information an easy endeavor, for fear of external impacts and loss of control and social cohesion. Particularly these days, when access to Chinese data by foreign authorities, academics, think tanks, and international organizations become ever more restricted. The challenges of accessing data makes it harder for the world to know, and thus to understand China's positions, aspirations, and conducts. This, no doubt, contributes to the knowledge gap and exacerbates the institutional and individual consequences to which I alluded to before. What can we do with this challenge here in Israel? As opposed to other challenges in Israel-China relations, improving our knowledge is a rather easy task. It only requires acknowledging reality and dedicating resources. As opposed to other geopolitical challenges, creating a generation of China experts is a no-brainer. It is also politically palatable. There should be no objection across all invested parties, whether business or political, domestic or external, to deepening and expanding knowledge about China. This will serve all parties. Furthermore, and as was acknowledged by China's Party Secretary and President Xi Jinping in several of his recent addresses, in its new development era, China is facing unprecedented challenges alongside unprecedented opportunities. Such challenges and opportunities project on third-party countries, among them Israel. Suspicion and setbacks in scientific and academic cooperation on part of the Anglo-American world in recent years has opened a window of rare opportunities for small, innovation-led third-party countries like Israel to step in. We should seize such moment. We should do so not lightly, but rather in a tailored and meditated way. Yet this does not mean that we should shy away from opportunities offhand, nor should we jump on them blindly. Rather, we should strive to deepen cooperation in certain sciences, in commerce and in education as the default, and make informed decisions while prudently considering the trade-offs based on deep understanding knowledge and, based on deep independent knowledge and understanding, and minimize biases and external considerations. This is where the challenge of lacking education and expertise about China should become a government priority. It is the key to advancing our own economic relations, reach new scientific heights, while relying on our sovereign and prudent capacity to make judgment. Thank you.
Thank you very much. This was very thought-provoking and
That's my goal in life.
yes. And we could start at the university level with, more hirings of China experts. True? Yes, indeed. Okay. So we have about 12 minutes for collecting questions. I suggest that I will collect a few questions and then I will give the floor back to you if you want to respond to each other, respond to the questions, raise another point that the challenges that you didn't want to talk about before or whatever, then we'll do it this way. Okay? So, Yuri, please.
Yes, thank you. I want to actually thank everybody for most excellent presentations, but I would like to focus on Hagai, because there is a huge elephant in this room, in these relations, and you are the only one who a little bit touched this elephant. Okay, we had 30 good years without the United States deciding that disengagement from China must be the status of every ally of the United States. But now it is very clear that the pressure will not evaporate in the next years at least. How Israel is ready to maintain its most profitable economic relations without jeopardizing its most important political ties?
Thank you.
Thank you very much. It was very provoking and interesting panel. I would like to thank Tami for practical advice. We can learn how to pronounce Chinese names. We can learn language. We can learn history. So my question to all panelists: can you give us some practical advice? It's not to me, for people who actually will make next 30 years of relationship, students of Asian Studies Department who came. So they are actually the face of the next decade, next 3 decades. So what would you give them as an action, of course, to do and to achieve? Thank you.
Thank you, Ilan. Right wing, left wing.
Galia, can I make a comment later on?
Yes, sure. So we have 2 more comments and then we'll move back to you. Okay. Professor Mezzini.
Can you all hear me? I've followed the developments between Israel and China for the last 60 years. We have learned basically how to live with a Chinese multifaceted foreign policy. In other words, China votes against Israel virtually on every issue in the UN. China has a strategic agreement with Iran. China accepts a 2-state solution. East Jerusalem is capital, 67 lines. On the other hand, China accepted the imperative of Israel to abandon the Harpy and the Falcon projects. What I have learned, therefore, is that we have decided these are the areas we disagree on. Let's move on to the areas that we agree on. And I'm delighted in the last 30 years, essentially the focus was where do we go from here in those specific areas that we agree on. Thank you.
Two points. Mr. Ambassador, you have a very well-equipped cultural center in Tel Aviv. Do something with it. Because you've been here a year, and I haven't yet, but I'm sure something's coming. So you'll be welcomed by all of us. So that's the first point. The second point is, I would just like to mention with every praise that over the years, Haggai Shagrir, has been a light in the whole relationship between the two countries. So you're very lucky to be able to talk with him. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, I think I will turn back to you and to you, Professor Wang. We have the elephant in the room. How do you maneuver between economic interest and political interest and the sensitivities? I think I would address this question also to Professor Wang, because I think Professor Wang noted before that the key to the relationship is what you called mutual respect, right? And this understanding that each state has its own sensitivities, and you need, as Professor Mezzini said, to find a way around this and not to do something that will be extremely difficult or embarrassing for the other side. So we have that elephant. Then we have all the opportunities that Ilan was asking about. And then you can just add your own things. So maybe we should go by the same order we started, and start with Haggai Shagrir, the light.
Okay. I would start actually with the action plan before for the young people and the people who study in Asia department. I call upon you to come and work in the foreign ministry. I want to use the opportunity. I think it's a great challenge, and I think it's a great opportunity for you as young people to go and serve in China, especially if it's your point of interest and you speak the language. I think it's an amazing adventure. I don't think you get so many opportunities that, at a lower level, you get so many responsibilities to promote the relationship between the two countries. So come to the foreign ministry. We have 4 missions in mainland China plus Hong Kong, and actually it's only second to the US. We have about 7 missions, and China is 5. The third one is India. So please come, we wait for you, and you're most welcome. Now about the more difficult question. Yuri, thank you very much for the question. Look, I think, and also Mr. Suo, I think, have said before, and I think Chinese know it very well, and he actually have said it, the US is our strongest ally and is very much central to the national security of Israel. The US is also the shield of Israel in the international arena. So no question about it, so when they raise concerns, as a friends and allies, we hear and heed what they have to say. At the same time, and it was said very clearly, China is very important global power, is a permanent member in the US Security Council. And as was said, in 2098, it's going to be the biggest economy according to the World Bank. And it's very important economic partner of the state of Israel. And we must use the opportunity. This is for the sake of the Israel economy. So our role in the next 10 years is to fulfill this opportunity without undermining Israel's national security and without undermining the partnership and the alliance that we have with the US. As simple as that. Maybe it's a big challenge, okay, but it's important for Israel. And we do it with China, as also was said by ambassadors and others, on a mutual respect, and also on the basis of deep recognition in our history and tradition and culture of the two countries, which are harnessed for the benefit of the two societies to make and create better, modern, and advanced society. So this is the win-win basis, which also was mentioned. This is the basis of the relationship of Israel-China. We have also, and we just conducted about several months ago, we have a dialogue on international organization with China, and we have a candid discussion, and we talk also on many issues that we don't see eye to eye, but we have a very good platform to discuss these two issues, like two good friends.
Thank you. Mr. Ambassador, you wanted to add a few words, right? Thank you. So we'll do the translation.
My assistant will help.
It's all here?
Okay.
No choice. Thanks.
这个非常高兴，也非常荣幸来参加今天的这个会议。
It gives me great pleasure to be here, and I'm also honored to be here.
我也认真的听了朋友们的所谈的各种看法，我觉得这些看法给我也很大的思考，启发。
I listened very carefully about the views shared by our friends, and they are very thought-provoking.
那我想呢，我个人认为，今天这个会议是一个很有成果的，也是很成功的一个会议。
I think this is a very successful and fruitful event.
借这个机会呢，我想再谈3点，和朋友们一起交流。
And taking this opportunity, I'd like to share 3 points with you.
第一呢，我想谈中华民族和犹太民族2大民族友好交往的历史源远流长。
First, I'd like to say that the history of the exchanges between the Chinese and Jewish people could date back to a very long time ago.
那么在2战期间，中国人民也向犹太难民及时的伸出了援手，同时呢，犹太人民也对中国人民的反抗外来侵略的斗争给予了支持和帮助。
During the Second World War, the Chinese people reached out to the Jewish refugees to help them, and also the Jewish people supported and helped the Chinese people in our resistance against foreign aggression.
我想在座的朋友们都十分清楚，中国历史上从来就没有过反犹主义。
I believe our friends here all know that there has. During the Second World War, the Chinese people reached out to the Jewish refugees to help them, and also the Jewish people supported and helped the Chinese people in our resistance against foreign aggression.
我想在座的朋友们都十分清楚，中国历史上从来就没有过反犹主义。
I believe our friends here all know that there hasn't been any anti-Semitism in the Chinese history.
中国人民始终对犹太民族抱有友好的感情。
The Chinese people have always been friendly to the Jewish people.
我想，在座的好多朋友都到过中国，也跟中国的民众有过接触。中国民众都普遍的钦佩以色列经济发展的成就，都渴望更多的了解以色列作为一个创新国度它的奥秘所在，也都希望进一步加强两国关系。
I believe many of our friends here have come to China and have contacted Chinese people. I believe you have noticed that Chinese people admire the Jewish people and the Israeli people. They hope to know the secrets to Israel's economic endeavors, the development, and also the secrets of becoming an innovation-driven nation to improve our bilateral relations.
中国的对外政策是按照事情本身的是非曲直来决定，独立自主的决定自己的政策和立场，没有专门反对哪一个国家的政策。
China's foreign policy is our independent decision based on the merits of things to make our policy and stance. We do not have any policy that targets at only one country or specific countries.
我想谈的第2点呢，就是 沙布瑞先生刚才也反复谈到了这一点，就是中以合作确实是互利共赢的合作。
And the second point I want to make, as Mr. Shabir said before, that the China-Israel cooperation is indeed mutually beneficial in nature.
就是这种合作实际上是体现在方方面面的。我就讲我个人经历的几件事情，大家就可以了解，这个我们这个合作的潜力有多大，这个合作的空间有多大。
And our cooperation could be reflected in many areas. I'd like to share some of my personal experiences just to demonstrate how big the potential and the room for our cooperation is.
我去年1月份到的以色列，去年3月份的时候，以色列朋友举行了一个视频会议，介绍以色列的水科技。
I came to Israel in January last year, and in last March, our Israeli friends had a video conference to show the water technology.
其中介绍的一项科技成果呢，就是从空气提取水的这个科技。
And one of the outcome of this water technology is that it can take water out of thin air.
我当时看了这个介绍以后，我好奇的我有2点。第一，我好奇这个科技，这项科技到底是个什么科技？第二，我好奇的是这个科技会有实际的用途吗？
I was curious about 2 things. First, what is this technology? And second, does it make any sense or does it produce any practical results?
结果11月份的时候，我就得到了答案。
And then I got my answer in October.
就是11月份的时候，这项科技在中国浙江这个落地，已经投资建厂，这个生产这个产品。第一期工程年产量是15万台。
And during that month, this technology has produced results in China's Zhejiang province. They had a factory there to manufacture these machines, and the first phase of this was to produce 150,000 machines of that technology.
所以企业家知道该怎么合作。
So the entrepreneurs could vote with their foot.
我讲的第2个故事就是前2天刚刚发生的故事。
And another personal experience just happened days ago.
这个我参观了以色列的一家农业的这个育种和这个农业技术公司。
I visited Israeli agricultural and seeding company.
这个公司的规模不算是太大的一个规模，但是听了朋友们的介绍，我才知道他在中国目前就有3个合作项目。
It was not a very big company, but after I heard their introduction, I noticed they have now 3 cooperation projects in China.
这3个项目分别在中国的广州市，在这个湖北的应城市和河南的南阳市。
They are in the 3 Chinese cities in Guangzhou, Yingcheng, and Nanyang.
所以说，以色列朋友开拓中国市场的努力，给我留下了深刻的印象。
So I was very impressed by our Israeli friends tapping the potential of the Chinese market.
同时呢，正如刚才沙布瑞先生介绍的那样，也有许多这个中国公司目前在这个以色列寻找发展的机会。
And also, as Mr. Shabir said, many Chinese companies are seeking business opportunities here in Israel.
那么这些公司在这儿这个开展业务，这个为以色列的经济社会发展做出了应有的贡献。当然，这些中国公司也得到了这个发展的机遇。
These businesses here could contribute to Israel's economic and social development, and they also achieve their own development.
所以说，中以之间的这些合作，确实是造福了2国人民，给2国带来了实实在在的利益。
So the cooperation between China and Israel indeed benefits the people in both countries, and they have brought concrete outcomes.
我特别想向朋友们讲的就是，中以合作不针对任何第三方，同时也不应该受到第三方的干扰。
I'd like to stress to our friends that China-Israel cooperation doesn't target any third party, and nor should it be affected by any third party.
我想讲的第3点就是，确实是在特拉维夫有一个很好的中国文化中心。
And the third point I'd like to make is that indeed here, in Tel Aviv, there is a very good China Culture Center.
虽然这个我在这儿我也这个代表这个中国文化中心的这个同事们，这个邀请朋友们，有时间去参观这个中心，去在那儿进行交流。
And here, on behalf of my colleagues at the Culture Center, I invite my friends to visit the center and to have a tour in there.
据我了解，他们最近一段时间也准备这个开办一些展览。
And as far as I know, in the near future, they are going to hold some exhibitions there.
最近的一个展览，据我的同事跟我讲，是关于中国的城墙展，同时也有以色列的一些城墙照片的展览。
And I think in the nearest future there will be an exhibition about Chinese city walls, and I believe there are also photos of Israeli city walls as well.
当然，朋友们都理解，因为疫情的原因，目前他们开展的活动比平常要少很多。我想，总之，疫情形势允许的话，他们一定会开办更多的活动。
And as I believe you could understand that due to the pandemic, they now have less events held there. But I believe when the situation gets better, there will be more events.
谢谢朋友们，那现在听我讲了这么多，我也很抱歉，我占用了太多的时间。
Thank you for your patience. I hope I didn't take much of your time.
Thank you. Thank you all.